Okay. Technology, I think is in with Collies.
Yes.
Is that right, Mike? Okay. So what I did was I grouped the technology into 3 areas, just as sort of an overview. I want to start first with the costs that are associated with Common Core or Smarter Balanced. And a little bit of background on that. The Smarter Balanced group or team or whatever you want to call it has released what they're calling consortium. Thank you, that was the word I was looking for. Has released what they're calling a technology readiness tool for school districts. And basically, the technology readiness tool is designed to sort of gauge where your district is at to prepare for testing beginning in 2015. And so what we had to do was basically just import our inventory or computers that we would generally use for testing. So for example, we're doing the NEWA testing in the schools. So we took the computers that we would use for our NEWA testing, and we take that and we put that in. We also put in things like our network, the way it's configured, what type of internet do we have coming in? Is it dial-up, DSL, Comcast, cable? And it takes all of that into consideration and then reports back to you and says, here are the areas where you're going to need to begin to address in order to be ready. The Smarter Balanced testing is all computer-based. It's not fully web-based. It's sort of basically it's what they're calling, it's a kiosk that we will load onto the workstations in the district. However, the students will be reaching outside of the school district to pull down questions, information, sound files. It's going to be very interactive, very media-based testing. So they're basically going to be requiring school districts to have headphones for students while they're taking the test. They're going to expect keyboarding. That's for typing. There's going to be typing portion of the test. There's also going to be some, probably interactive type questions. All of this is still to be determined as they're developing the tests. It's just going to be very media rich. And so in preparation for that, I tried to address some areas that we would want to consider this coming year so that this all wouldn't fall on us, the year before the testing happens, to sort of break that up. So for example, ordering, getting started with ordering some headphones so that we're ready rather than waiting and having to order, headphones for all the students in 2000, on next year's budget. So what I did was I included at each of the schools in the supply lines, getting started with some headphones. And also some other things. One would be, we have 2 labs. One is at the Underhill School and the other is our W4 lab at the Memorial School that right now are not wired. And they're fully wireless labs. And based on our experience with the NEWA testing, I think it's in the best interest that we have those labs wired with connectivity, because this being a test that's going to reach out to the internet, it's going to require, some pretty robust speed. And I don't want to risk doing that over the wireless. The speeds are just not quite there yet. Even though we might be able to do some of the testing over the wireless, I think we do want to have some dedicated spaces where it's fully wired and we're ready for that, for the testing. So I've included in there the wiring of the Underhill Computer Lab as well as the W4 lab at the Memorial School. The next area would be a cycle of software renewals that come around every 3 years. This coming year is one of those years, so we see that software line increase during that time. These are for 3-year renewal subscriptions to some of our hardware appliances that we use for filtering, and for some other different services. So you'll see an increase in that as well. Also, replacement equipment. This is the big one. I want to go back to last year. Last year, I had proposed $99,000 in this line. It was decided to take $60,000 and put that onto a warrant article, which was passed, and I believe that will come up or is on the agenda. Karen mentioned for our next meeting. Okay. So for the 15th. And so $60,000 was taken out of that 99 proposed, put onto the as a warrant article. So this year, again, I'm putting in there a pretty significant amount that I'm asking for. But one thing that I did was create a master replacement schedule for the district. We didn't have in the past basically a cycle of replacement for all of our mobile labs, all of our computer labs, and I put together a chart for that. And based on that, we would need to replace a couple items for the next year, and those would be based on the replacement cycle. The Underhill Computer Lab computers would be up for replacement, as well as I believe we're looking at, or I'm sorry, replacements for the Colley and the Memorial classrooms, and then the Underhill Computer Lab as well. So based on that schedule, those are the three areas that we would need to replace, so that we will stay on schedule with our replacements. So in a nutshell, that's about it. Any questions that I can answer?
Well, for the benefit of everybody here, the Underhill lab was wired, became unwired. I think that might have been before Matt got here, unfortunately.
Yeah.
You know, I guess when we're talking about replacing particularly labs, I gotta ask, are we seeing high failure rates that are indicating it? Because I realized that in years leading up to this, that it was pretty predictable to take like a 3-year cycle and say that your hardware is probably outdated by that point. I personally think that we're on a plateau at this point, and you can't just say 3 years and throw it away, unless you're having a high rate of failures. Or if the hardware is not up to what we need it to do. So before I would really want to vote to fund this, I would want to see more than a time frame of 3 years. I would want to see something that's saying what we have is not filling the needs of what we have, or it's becoming too expensive to keep. Because I think the replacement model is changing in the industry, and particularly where we're not high demand users in schools. We're not CAD programs, and we're not running stuff of that nature. So, you know, I'd like to see some data as to what we have failing and so forth. The other thing that I would like to, you know, consider, which we did consider when we purchased the Underhill Lab, for the benefit of everybody here, the Underhill Lab was first built and purchased as a donation, and then was purchased with off-lease computers down around $75 a piece, which have performed wonderfully. And I think we should look at the off-lease computer market. It's huge right now because so many offices are closing down, and you're able to get entire lots of computers loaded with operating systems. It's expensive to buy brand new, particularly if you're going to go Mac. Is that your intention, Matt, to replace those with Macs?
That would be, I think, in the best interest, just because that's what the platform currently is. So yes.
Right, which I also think is a mistake. I've brought this up before. We're exposing kids to one operating system, one platform. You know, 21st century, rounding things out. The Mac platform is arguably more expensive for hardware, and you know, I think we need to look at that. and really do some cost analysis on what we're spending our money on. It's nice to just go out and buy, all new stuff, but our citizens aren't doing that. And we need to reflect here what is going on with them that are paying our bills. And in these times when people are having to get by, we've got to make an effort to do that here. And I think this is one opportunity that we need to look into the options of off-lease computers and whether we really need to replace things or not. Thank you.
I can answer. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go
I was
right
just going to
ahead.
answer. I think there's a question at the beginning that I can answer. That's okay. I think the question, or you were asking about being able to provide some information for replacements. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So I think there's two things we can do. One is look at what are the minimum requirements going to be for the smarter ballots. We know that that's going to be computer-based testing. And right now, what we don't have released yet, and my understanding with conversation at the Department of Education is that they're going to be releasing what the minimum requirements are for existing hardware. So basically, the X amount of computers that you have will not meet the minimum requirements for the testing. It has to do with resolution of the screens to display what the questions are, and I think that's an area where if we find out that we have computers that don't meet that, we're probably going to need to address that to be ready for testing. So we can use that as a gauge, as well as look at what are we troubleshooting and fixing, which we do have information on that as well. The timeline is a 5-year cycle for the classrooms, just so everyone is aware. We base that on 5-year classroom replacements, which is a pretty good life for a computer these days. The laptops, the laptop carts that get moved around daily, that's a 4-year, and the other cycles. So we have those two. We have a 5-year for the classroom and 4-year on the laptop. And certainly those can be adjusted. What happens in my experience is if you push a replacement back a year, you're going to have a year where it influx, that increase comes where you're replacing the desktops, the laptops, and everything else all in the same year. And that creates quite a spike in the replacement line. And I've lived through that before, and that can be very difficult to get back on track. So, but there's a couple ways that we can look at those replacements.
Well, I would just add that regarding PCs off lease, we did that at the Underhill Lab. We had 24 that we were running. We bought 30. We cloned them all and literally replaced boxes, replaced the computer when there was a problem, which only took about 5 minutes. Those prices are down to like $50 now to buy a computer with an operating system. It's just absolutely crazy. So it gets down to the point of you can have so many of them so cheap. We are not high demand users, and these machines are, they're fast machines. I would have very doubtful that we're not going to meet the requirements of the testing of those machines. So I would encourage us to look at those options, and I would also, we've had this discussion when I'm not on the school board. I'm on the school board now, and I think it's important for us on the school board to show the public that we're looking at these alternatives. We're not just going out and ordering right off the top shelf and saying, we've got to have the best. We are looking at some alternatives like people are having to do right now, and we're saying, you know what? We're looking at some of these things that might be more cost effective without altering our performance and without altering what we can deliver to the kids. So I think some of those things that if we could bring those forward, that helps us with the budget committee. That helps us with the public passing our budget, because it shows that we're really looking at those things, and we're not just assuming that we're going to get the funding to go. And from my point of view, I'd rather get 2 computers that work than one dynamite computer, because here it's about you know, getting the computers in the hands of the kids. And sharing doesn't work that well in my view. So I would ask that we look into some of these alternatives and see what we can come up with and be innovative about this, rather than just going by a schedule and buying, you know, the top. Thank you.
Tricia?
With the more balanced test, the smarter balanced test, do the current labs we have, are those in, like, how are all these kids gonna take a test at the same time? Is it gonna be the same time, or is it gonna be more like, and this might not be a question for you, but is it more like NEWA that you roll classes out, and it's not gonna be like kneecaps, like you can hear a pin drop for 3 hours in the
Yeah,
building?
we're definitely not gonna have all students testing at the same time. We wouldn't be able to do that,
And have,
equipment-wise, but it would probably be similar to what we're doing.
Yeah, we haven't gotten the
NEWA-wise.
specifications yet,
Okay.
So-
as far as, whether we can have, you know, whether everyone has to take it at the same time or not, or whether we can have like 2 pods. I know when we piloted a writing assessment here at Cawley, the students weren't allowed to talk to each other in between. So we had to do just 2 sessions of 8th graders, and they couldn't like cross in the hallway, that kind of thing. So we did need enough for at least half of the grade level. But this is a different kind of test, so we don't have any of those specifications yet.
no, and because this smarter balanced test is across the country, have any of these vendors started offering grants to, I mean, we're a technology-rich district. There are some that are not as technology-rich as us that could be having, you know, be in sticker shock right now,
Sure.
where maybe we would be able to apply for some of these grants as well.
Not that I'm aware, but, you know, of course, you're dealing with a lot of, you know, yeah, they're having to consider large school districts. So once they release more information, you know, I'm not sure if that's part of the plan, but there's nothing that I'm aware of that's specific to technology for the smarter balance as far as grants that are available.
Okay, another question. You mentioned the life cycle of the laptop carts, the computer labs, but you didn't mention the life cycle of the iPad carts. Because our iPads are 1s and technology is now on 3s. I'm just wondering, do we have a life cycle of them as well?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Because I think given that iPads are so new, that's, you know, we're probably in the same place a lot of districts are in with what is a life cycle of an iPad. I based that the schedule on a 3-year. They may be, we may get much more life out of those, which then that could be adjusted. But you know, that they could go 4 years, 5 years. It's hard to tell. But again, I don't think just, you know, because there's a newer operating system available. What they've changed, which is nice about the iOS, which is on the iPads, is that you can still have the hardware, and they're making the software upgrades available without having to replace your hardware as often. So, you know, we could have those for much longer. With an iPad, you've got, because they're in the hands of, you know, kids, there's also that chance of I guess more things happening, although we've had great experience so far. But 3 years is what I base that on. However, that could change, certainly.
You just hadn't mentioned it. I was just wondering.
Yep, good question.
Cheryl?
Just to get back to some numbers. So the Dr. Littlefield had spoken about the technology for the Smarter Balance being about 80,000. And what you were presenting today, is that, what, can you split that up for me? I mean, is it additional, like, is your budget more level, more up, down, and how's that comparing to the 80,000 that he had?
Well, the biggest increase again is in that replacement equipment line, where, you know, it's $84,220, which is an increase. I was given the last year's was $5,471, which is, you know, obviously a small number for a whole district replacement. However, the $60,000 was put on the warrant article, which did pass. which will come up at your next board meeting, the proposal I have put in. So we'll be able to use the $60,000 that was approved last year for this school year.
So your budget's up a little bit, and then plus we have an expectation that we will need to spend 80,000 on technology for the Smarter Balance.
So the 80,000, I think that that Dr. Littlefield mentioned, yes, in the beginning would include that replacement cycle as well.
Mike? Excuse me, Mike? I know it's me, but if someone could help me out, I only count about 7,000 or 8,000 increase. I can't find that, but the total is 78,000.
Next page.
Yep, Mike, it's the 5735 line, 2840.
Sorry, it's right above the totals.
Yeah.
Okay, I just couldn't find
Sure.
that line. Thank you. That's 78,000 right there.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Dave?
Matt, are you looking at alternatives for tablets?
Yes, actually, there are a couple things that are available. One is since we are beginning to use the Google Apps for education, there are devices that are, sort of tailored to the Google Apps accounts, which are very nice. Those I think are options. However, the reason that I included the iPads was because we've rolled out the iPads already and teachers have been using those. There's some familiarity with using that tool. A lot of them have personally gone out and bought their own, but that's really the only reason that I specifically included the iPads. But there certainly are some alternatives. Yeah.
Well, and again, I think we need to reflect the community. And, if there's some lower cost alternatives. The other concern that I have is we move into 21st century. I know Macs are great, and they are regarded as the top of the line. But I think we need to show some other platforms. I think we need to show some diversity, I guess is what I'm saying here, because as we're getting into 21st century, it's going to be about all the different ways that things are done and this kind of stuff. And I think it would help all of us, the teachers and the kids, to be exposed to some other operating systems and other devices in other forms, to kind of prepare them for that. So I really think we should consider that. And again, it may be a benefit now for us presenting a budget to the public to be able to show them, look, we were going to buy some iPads, but we're going with this X tablet, whatever it is, and we're going to save, 20% or 25% or something. To me, it's a great way to show the public that we are doing everything we can and looking for some alternatives at the same time still delivering what we feel is necessary. So, and I think, technology is really an opportunity to do that because people understand those things. They buy these things. They know how much they cost. When we start talking about some of the other issues, people don't buy those. People don't buy curriculums. They don't know if you're saving money on it or if you're not. But these are real comparable items that people can look up on the internet and see how much they cost. And frankly, it can seem a bit, extravagant if we're seen as buying top of the line all the time. Now, myself, if it's really shown out in a maintenance schedule, maybe like a Volvo, that you're going to get all those miles out of it, then I'd say, yeah, then that could beat the perception, and that's a good technical argument to make. But if it's not, I think we really should think about that, and I think this is a good year to do it because we're in a continuing down cycle here, and just to share one thing, and I like the level funding, and when I got on the budget committee, I wanted to keep things level. One of the things we have to realize is if we don't spend another dime here, people's taxes still go up. because revenues overall are going down for our community. So even if we don't spend another dime, people are faced with higher taxes. So anything we can do to show that we are working toward that, doing the best we can, and particularly with technology, that's what I see as something that they would understand. Thank you.